When you write a character, you're generally hoping that the audience will like them. Even if they're a villain, it's still a good thing for them to be popular. If people are invested in your characters, it's satisfying, because you know that something you made brings joy to people. But it can be even more satisfying to really piss people off. Hate sinks are characters written with one goal in mind: to make the audience despise them. They're not loved, not respected, and in the rare instances that they get fan art, it's done to mock and parody them. These characters fill the audience with rage and despair. But isn't that a bad thing? Why would you want a character who makes your game worse to experience? If you are determined to implement this kind of character, how do you do it right? Let's talk about Wulbren Bongle. People absolutely hate this guy. The vitriol directed at him surpasses all the main antagonists combined. He's arrogant, hypocritical, ungrateful, spiteful, and worst of all, he's an absolute prick to Barkus Root, a man who risked his life countless times to try and save him. But he isn't poorly written. Everything I described about him is entirely intended. He's supposed to be an insufferable shithead. Despite poor Barkus being captured by goblins and Dwagar, it's the friend he was trying to save that is the true villain in his story. Wulbren's whole arc is very well crafted. You go through the story reacting exactly how the game wants you to. You're excited to meet him after Barkus hypes him up, but then upon meeting him, you're surprised at what a dickhead he is. Not just to you, but to Barkus. You save him from Moonrise Towers, and he acts like he's hot shit who did you a favor just by existing in your presence. He's absolutely insufferable, and you end up wishing you just left him there to rot. But when you see him at Moonrise after fighting Ketheric, he's sorry for being rude to you. He gives you praise and does seem to actually regret being such a cock to you. Then later, when you run into him in Act 3, you both have a common enemy in Gortash. It's in your interest to work with him, so you give him another chance. Maybe he actually isn't so bad and was just being prickly before because he had just been imprisoned. He gives you a super bomb and tells you to go in and blow up the foundry where Gortash crafts his massive constructs, which is manned by a different gnome clan known as the Gondians. But they're not working there by choice. They have bomb collars on their neck like it's the Sierra Madre, and their families are being held hostage. It's hard to get more coerced than that. Wulbren wants you to just bomb the place and not worry about the Gondians. But Barkus wants you to speak with them and give them a chance to surrender peacefully. By saving their families, you can get them to rebel against their captors and help you shut down the foundry. However, after you go through the work of sparing and saving the Gondians, and believe me, it is work, Wulbren confronts you. He demands the execution of these people who had been forced to serve the villain against their will, even though they are now free and just want to live in peace. Even if you manage to talk him down, he declares that he will eventually slaughter them and you. He's out of his mind. And this moment really hits if you were convinced to give him a second chance. He's a piece of shit, because again, he's the villain of somebody else's arc. The best ending here is Barkus rallying the Iron Hand gnomes and convincing them to follow him instead of Wulbren, as his story completes and he realizes he's been looking at the bald Bongle through rose-tinted glasses. His arc is that of realizing that his close friend is a total jackass, and it works so perfectly because they make you, the player, absolutely fucking loathe Wulbren. Barkus' story would not work nearly as well if Wulbren did not incite such bitter spite in anybody who had to deal with him. They use a horribly unlikable character as a foundation for the story of a likable one. So, it's really easy to write a hate sink, right? Just make them an annoying jerk and you're done. Worst case scenario here is that they're not hated enough, and that's not really a huge problem, is it? If a character is meant to be likable, but they're terribly written, it can have disastrous consequences. This is most common with characters that are supposed to be funny, but are really just obnoxious and annoying. They can be straight up game ruining. But if a hate sink is poorly written, then the player will likely just be apathetic towards them. And hell, there's a good chance they're still hated anyways. You can do a terrible job writing these characters and still accomplish your goal perfectly. They're easy, aren't they? I just can't escape this guy. Kai Lang is a character you are meant to hate, and he is also the most hated character in the Mass Effect series. So that's a success story, yeah? Obviously it's not, but why? What went wrong here? I and many others have talked at length about why everyone despises him so much, but if we take a step back, is that actually a bad thing? You're supposed to hate him, and we do. But we hate him for the wrong reasons. I can't stand either of these guys, but Wulbren Bongle is very well written, and Kai Lang is very poorly written. All the complaints I listed about Wulbren are explanations as to why he is a bad person, whereas the biggest complaints about Kai Lang, his plot armor and tryhard edginess, are complaints about him being a bad character. Just saying write the character well isn't helpful, but I think I know what really separates the two. Let's take a look at another character in Mass Effect 3, Hongeril. I actually really do not like how he is written in this game. I think it's a pretty clear-cut case of character assassination, turning somebody who is caring but stubborn into an irredeemable asshole. But I think he works really well as a hate sink. When it comes to gaming, what makes a good hate sink is not necessarily good writing, but rather player agency. Hongeril ignores any plans you make and instead orders the destruction of a ship that you are on. He's fine killing you and your squad mates, as well as forcing the rest of the Quarians to stay engaged in a losing battle that many of them wanted to flee from. People really hate him for this, but they hate the character, not his writing. This works because you're able to respond to him exactly how you want to in that moment.
The Dreadnought was a perfect.
This catharsis makes it clear that the writers and the player are on the same page. They are aware of exactly what you want to do in that situation, and they let you do it. Because you're given that catharsis, your rage stays focused on the character. The game itself is nodding alongside you saying, yeah, isn't this guy the worst? It makes it clear that you're feeling exactly how you're supposed to and gives you vindication. Thus it ends up being satisfying. It's fun to hate Hongeril for this, even though I would still say it's bad writing because I feel like it contradicts who he is established to be in Mass Effect 2. Looking back at Wulbren Bongle, you're always given this same kind of agency. After you free him, which you don't even have to do, you can directly call him out for his shitty attitude towards both you and Barcus. You can also just refuse to work with him in Act 3, or agree to, and then use the super bomb he gives you for the Foundry on something else.
Careful! Lots of open flames down here. I don't want that bomb close to any of them.
However, this level of agency is not actually required. There are plenty of games that do this archetype well without really giving you any sort of option in how you deal with them. But if you're not giving the player that choice, you need to be exactly correct in your assumptions of what they want to do. It's okay if a character's outcome is preset, but you need to make sure that that preset is giving the players exactly what they want. This is something that Kai Lang actually kind of gets right. His death always plays out the same. Whether or not you actually press the button for the Renegade Interrupt, your Shepherd will still pull out their Omniblade, fatally stab him, and call him a son of a bitch. Even if you had the option for this to play out another way, you wouldn't take it. This is a really good and cathartic way to deal with him. It's doing exactly what you wanted to do. In this moment, the player character, and writers are all on the exact same page. The problem is the earlier encounters with him. And you may wonder how you could play those out differently. All the times you ran into him prior, he attacked you and you fought him in self-defense. What else are you going to do there? The thing is, in these moments, the player wants to win, but the writers want you to lose. They do this by making Shepard act like a complete idiot who gets their ass kicked in a cutscene when you don't have control. Then, when you actually fight Kai Lang in gameplay, it's one of the most frustrating examples of winning the boss fight and losing in the cutscene that I have ever seen, exemplified by the fact that you literally softlock your game if you beat him too hard. Because the player character, and writers are all on completely different pages, our anger is not directed at the character of Kai Lang. We aren't really mad at him for killing Thane, we're mad at the writers for making Thane charge towards the man with a sword while he holds a gun, and for making Shepard just sit back and do nothing as the fight goes on. If you're not going to give us any meaningful choice, you need to at least make it so we are not pulling our hair out because our character does stupid things that we wouldn't do, like not even shooting him when he takes his shield down. Shepard, he is exposed. Right now, his shield is away. Fucking shoot him! It's all about making sure the player feels satisfied with their options and actions. And that is where Kai Lang fails, yet Wulbren Bongle succeeds with flying colors. However, so far we've only talked about characters that oppose or challenge you directly. Even when they're on your side, they still cause you problems. But what about the hate sinks that never actually do anything harmful to you? We'll start by looking at Skyrim. In Whiterun, there is a very well-known character. If you're even slightly familiar with this game, You know him, Nazim. Wulbren, Hongarel, and Kai Lang are notable secondary characters and a main antagonist. Nazim is a completely generic NPC among dozens with no quest and no deep interaction with the player. But he's iconic. He doesn't serve any role, really. He's just a random, inconsequential guy who's a dick.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
This single line of dialogue has made this character into one of the most despised NPCs in any video game. It's the intense smugness paired with just how wrong he is. You go to the Cloud District constantly to speak with the Jarl, when he himself never goes. The unapologetic way he views himself above you while being so off base universally strikes a nerve with players. But you can't respond. You can't prove him wrong, you can't rub in his face that you're the Thane and Balgruuf is your bestie. You can't do what you want to do. So this is a failure on Bethesda's part, right? No, because you can do this.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
The ability to murder him gives this interaction significantly more depth. It gives the players a free-form way to express their sheer contempt for this guy, and it means that when you simply walk away, it's not because you're prevented from responding how you want to, instead, you're taking the high road. It means that you can at the very least take solace in the fact that by doing nothing, you're still making a choice. It makes this shallow interaction satisfying. You can also murder Wulbren Bongle at any point, but you're probably not going to because it would make Barkus sad and you'd get hit with the very reasonable consequences of people not liking you murdering a man out in the open. But again, the knowledge that you are actively taking the high road makes it more satisfying and leaves that vital synchronicity in place. This is why essential NPCs tend to make people really upset in Bethesda games, because now when you interact with a rude character, you are restricted. They're mocking you from underneath their plot armor, and you can't do anything about it. Even if you're not the kind of person who kills the hate sinks that you're able to murder, it's still frustrating when you know that you don't even have the option. One of the most infamous examples of this in Skyrim is Maven Blackbriar, but Bethesda managed to make an even worse version of her in Starfield. At one point, that's not a Starfield character, that is a graph. A graph that shows that over 90% of viewers aren't subscribed. Now how did this get here? I'll just go and put it away. At one point in Starfield, you can piss off Benjamin Bayou, the shamelessly corrupt oligarch of the cyberpunk oil rig city, Neon. He decides that the best course of action is to meet you, one-on-one, in a private room, where he then tells you, hey, guess what, idiot? I'm framing you for murder, and there's nothing you can do about it. Once you leave this room, the guards are going to come up and arrest you for a murder you didn't do. Now, there's one very obvious way to respond to a corrupt oligarch privately telling you he's framing you for murder, and that's to become actually guilty of murder. There is no reason not to kill him here and now. The game has set up a situation with a blatantly obvious solution, then gives you no way to do it. If you try, he just falls on his hands and knees, or just ignores your bullets altogether. Now, I think essential NPCs are a necessary evil. Not every story can be told in a way that allows the murder of everyone. But if you're going to set up a scenario where killing this man is the most obvious thing to do, and the player can't do it, how is that going to be anything but frustrating? In this moment, I'm not mad at Bayou, I'm mad at Bethesda. If you're going to put in a character this insufferable, there needs to be some way to give them comeuppance. At least Maven Blackbriar never actively works against you. She's off being evil on the side. This guy is an antagonist who opposes you directly, and you can't do anything about him. Also, his actions make no sense. Why would he ever in a million years put himself in this situation? It's as if not only the writers know he's invincible, but the character does as well. It's like he knows he literally cannot be killed. But believe it or not, this exact style of irritation can sometimes be clearly intentional. The Benjamin Bayou encounter is an example of bad writing in game design, but this frustration can actually be done in a way where it's pretty funny. Persona 3 was the introduction of social links into the series. It was kind of a mixed bag. There were a lot that were pretty mid, a few genuine standouts, and what is universally considered to be the worst social link in the entire series, Nozomi Sumitsu, the Gourmet King. If you've ever seen a tier list with his social link on it, it was at the very bottom. But the thing is, I think it's actually one of the best written in the game. Other social links have pretty significant issues with pacing and writing that can make them fail at making you feel how they want you to feel. For example, in the Hierophant social link, I really didn't care about this old couple's dead son because they brought him up so much that it felt laughable. Hey guys, I just got some takoyaki. Our son used to eat takoyaki. He's dead now. I miss our son. I wish he was not dead. But you're supposed to find Sumetsu pretty insufferable. I mean, just look at the first impression. He's messily eating sandwiches, and to talk to him, you need to have high enough charm. This guy demands charm out of you. Then you need to give him a specific healing item that you have to have found in Tartarus, and then you need to pass his quiz on restaurants. Realistically, there's zero reason for your character to actually care about this guy. He makes these absurd demands of you right out the gate, and there's really nothing that indicates he's worth the effort. He's just some fat kid sitting on a bench. In Persona 5, you form relationships with your confidants because they have something of value to offer you. This means that there is an in-character reason to stick around, even if they're initially really prickly towards you, and that means that they have more room for a fuller character arc. There is literally nothing in-universe that sets Sumetsu apart. There is no reason for the player character to put in all this work to grow closer to him instead of, say, Taxi Man or Mitsuru Lesbian. But we the players know that he has a card above his head, and that means he's a social link, and you want to get as many of those bonds as you possibly can. It's almost like the game is teasing you, setting out a social link to see how well trained you are. Will you grovel and jump through hoops for this terrible character just because he's here? Because the thing is, you can just walk away and not talk to him. There are countless other social links with much more likable characters that you can spend your time with instead. And his associated arcana, the moon, isn't even anything special. But if you are a good little player who puts in the work to start the social link, that's where things get even funnier. See, this isn't a case of a character with a rough exterior and a heart of gold. No, he's a terrible person. He's a greedy, arrogant glutton who's loud and obnoxious. He's rude to you, and you learn that he's got enemies before you even learn his name. And why does he have those enemies? Because he scammed a child out of money. He's the worst. And now that you see he really is just a terrible person, you kinda wanna just focus on the social links with people who actually have, redeeming qualities. But the game does something hilarious. It makes him available every single day. Working around the schedules of your social links is difficult. They're only available on certain days of the week, and students aren't available in the week leading up to exams. Except for Sumetsu. He's the only student at your school you can hang out with pre-exam, and he is the only social link available every single day. The game always gives you the option to hang out with this guy. And there will be times where he's the only one available. It doesn't force you to interact with him, but it knows that you can't stand wasting a day when a social link is available, and you'll come crawling right back to him. Oh, and of course the best way to raise his social link is to kiss up to him. Sure, you can pick the rude options, but then you don't get those lovely points. Can't have that, can you? It's all about efficiency. And then, this straight-up prank of a social link ends in a beautiful manner. In Persona 3 Reload, you can reverse a couple of the social links by doing something really crappy. It's genuinely pretty difficult to do. Like, you can tell this child that her parents' divorce is her fault, and even that isn't enough to reverse the social link. In Sumetsu's Rank 9 scene, the second to last one in his social link, he will try to scam somebody. Your only options are to call him out, and when you do, the social link reverses. This is impossible to avoid. Normally by this point in a social link, the character has pretty much finished their arc and grown as a person, but he is still such a piece of shit that calling him out for scamming people pisses him off so much that it literally inverts the magical arcana representing your bond. But this whole thing here is actually a trick. The father of the child that Sumetsu scammed hired thugs to beat him up, but he is so pathetic that they can't bring themselves to do it. It is only at this point that Sumetsu actually starts to grow as a person. And even that is done funny, because the arcana immediately flips back right side up and then ranks up. They do a fake out reverse just for a joke to show how much he sucks. Then finally, in his rank 10, last social link scene, he's grown as a person. He looks back and talks about the bad things he did and reflects on why he did them. It is actually well written, and a pretty satisfying conclusion for an arc that essentially happened over the span of 2 cutscenes. The sheer speed with which he turns things around is, again, a joke. At the very end of the game, when you're getting your final scenes with all the social links that you maxed, you see a lot of them making progress on the things that they had resolved to do. It's only been a few months, so nobody is there yet, but they're putting in actual effort towards what you helped inspire them to do. Except for Sumetsu, who turned his life around so fast that by March, he has become a famous food critic who women swoon over that is getting a statue dedicated to him in the mall! None of the characters you actually like have nearly this much success. So, that's Sumetsu. It's just a series of various jokes at your expense, seeing how low you'll stoop for a social link. Is it the worst in the game? Oh, absolutely. It's by far the worst social link in the entire series, really. But that's the point. There's a saying, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. And this exists to be really annoying for people who only care about optimization. It's akin to those shoes in Yakuza 0 which meow when you walk. The description says it might give you financial luck. Can you really pass that up? Or are you gonna be a good boy and put on the kitty shoes? There is one thing that holds the joke back, however, and that is Orpheus Telos. To get this very powerful persona, you need to max out every social link in a single playthrough. And this is a persona that's basically a necessity for a certain secret boss. It means that you actually kinda do need to max out Sumetsu, and that hurts the humor. Because what makes it funny is that you can at any point just walk away and never talk to him again. When that option is gone, it kinda drifts back into Bayou territory. So in conclusion, it comes down to making sure that the writers and players are on the same page, and letting the players give these despised characters what they have coming. You need to make sure that the player never feels like they have a lack of agency, and is never disappointed by a lack of catharsis. Obviously, there's plenty more hate sinks in games than the few I covered. What characters do you guys loathe with all your heart? And this isn't engagement bait, I genuinely love unhinged rants about fictional characters. So go feral in the comments. Just be civil to each other. Thanks for watching, folks. Thank you to all my patrons, and an extra special thank you to Audie T, Amy Lech, Ilya Kukushkin, and Samuel Wagner.